Who are you?
I'm a magical princess from another dimension.
A warm welcome or a warm welcome back. So in this episode, we're going to be exploring all things extroverted intuition, or NE. So we'll look at what Jung said about the function. We look at some key themes and some key words connected with it, which types use it in which position, and we'll have a look at some memes and see what we can learn about the types from the cultural zeitgeist around MBTI. So welcome to the channel. My name's Gillian Soers, and I've been a self-development and a meditation teacher for over 25 years. So this channel is all about soft skills with a bit of soul in it. So you probably already know that there is 8 cognitive functions. So even if extroverted intuition is not your dominant function, it's extremely helpful to understand how each of the functions work so that you can understand others, but also so that you can actually use the function. And some of you will be familiar with De Bono's 6 hats parallel thinking method, where each hat represents a different way of thinking. And so in meetings, the meeting will go from one hat to the other so that everybody gets a chance to share from the different perspectives. And some of those hats really match well with the MBTI. Like you could say extroverted feeling would be the red hat, the feeling hat. And probably introverted sensing with its caution would be the black hat. But welcome to the 8 hats of the MBTI. So if we can learn to really understand these 8 perspectives when it comes to creativity or managing people or decision making, this really enables us to be incredibly flexible in terms of understanding different ways of thinking. So stay tuned, and we're going to look at extroverted intuition, which is one of the perceiving functions. So there's 4 of them, and it's the way that we take in information. So if you are if this is your dominant function, you'll either be an ENFP or an ENTP. Yeah, so they are the 2 types out of the 16 that use this function as their predominant function. The ENTP has its auxiliary function of introverted thinking, which gives the creativity or the extroverted thinking a really different flavor. And this is really important, that we never use functions in isolation. And then the ENFP uses introverted feeling. So again, that gives them a really different flavor. Actually, there was one meme which said, what's the difference between the ENTP and the ENFP? And it's the ENTP can argue without crying. And from personal experience, having been close to an ENTP, you can never win an argument with them. And I used to say to them all the time, even if you win the argument, doesn't mean that you're right, because they're T, they're not emotional. And they can just keep firing their points to the F, just usually takes it personally and gets upset or exhausted. So they've got quite a different flavor, but nevertheless, their dominant function is the same. And then we have the 2 types that use extroverted intuition as their auxiliary functions. So that's the INFP and the INTP. Yeah, so they've got the same functions, but in a different order. So let's have a look at what Carl Jung actually said, because he was the original founder of these terms in his book, Psychological Types, written over 100 years ago. And so this is what he had to say about extroverted intuition. So intuition is the function of unconscious perception. In the extroverted attitude, it is wholly directed to outer objects, So it deduces out what the environment implies beyond the obvious. Yeah, so it's not looking at what is, it's looking at what could be, what the future implies. So how it looks and feels. In consciousness, it appears as a watchful, expectant attitude. Now, some clever YouTubers have made videos about how to recognize the types just from their body language and dress. And certainly with the ENFP, he's described them with that constantly their eyes scanning the environment, very curious, very alert to what's going on around them. A quick, penetrating way of seeing possibilities before others do. Yeah, so they're used to seeing what you could do with all the mixture of the ingredients available. So their relationship to facts. Now, this is another really interesting thing that often the NE type, get kind of stereotyped as being very dreamy, up in the air, not practical, and making up conspiracies out of the air. But actually, whenever someone has NE as their dominant function, as their fourth function, they'll have introverted sensing, which is all about accumulating facts and observing changes and noticing details. So even though it's never going to be their dominant strength, it still is in their four functions, and it still is what they're using. So any function will dip in as much as it needs to, often maybe not enough, but it uses the SI function to observe enough facts that then it extrapolates that into possibilities or theories or what ifs. So they don't just pull their what ifs out of the air, they are actually observing the facts. But as he goes on to say, once a fact has yielded a new avenue, it may be discarded to chase the fresh path. So their core drive, he said, emerging possibilities are compelling motivators, compelling motives. Yeah, so they're always looking what next. NE is impelled to move on, to open the next door, often prioritizing the future potential over the present situation. And I think this gives the NE its characteristic restlessness. They're always looking to the grass to see if it's greener over somewhere else. When one-sided, so this is of course the danger, and we'll talk more about the downside of NE at the end of the video. But Jung notes the extroverted intuition may keep scenting out new possibilities with relative unconcern for stability. So this means, again, the grass being greener over there means they can suddenly, and surprisingly to the people around them, up and off to a new relationship, a new project, a new country, a new living situation, a new lifestyle. They're known for reinventing themselves, sometimes tearing down what was just built in terms of change. So I think there's definitely a tendency to be a little bit dissatisfied. Yeah, always kind of focusing on what's next. Okay, so this is the ChatGPT definition, which is a kind of a summary of what Jung said, but let's have a look at it. So it's an outward-facing perceiving function that rapidly spots emerging possibilities, patterns, and implications in the environment. It treats current facts as springboards to new ideas. It generates multiple hypotheses at once and prefers to keep their options open so that it can explore connections that others might miss. I think this also gives them their open-mindedness. They're loath to decide on anything too soon about anyone or anything. In practice, NE shows up as quick reframing, what-if brainstorming, playful perspective shifts, and a knack for linking disparate concepts with the risk of becoming scattered if not anchored by follow through. I think that's a really good, thorough kind of definition. And that ability to playful perspectives, I think that also gives those with that any function in their top functions the ability to connect with every man, because they can step in their shoes and they've got a vivid imagination, not very judgmental, so they can enter the worlds of others and relate to all sorts of people. Now, let's look at some key words. So for these keywords, I do have to give a call out to this channel, Alexis Kingsley, a great channel. So she goes very deep into the topic of MBTI, but more recently she has made loads of video about creativity and time management and getting yourself organized, and yeah, awesome channel. So she had actually scouted through Jung's work and identified some key themes or some key words. First one being exploration. It's classic any, off they go, and before they know it, they're like completely confused with options. So they will go down any random path to find out new ideas and new concepts, and they can often, I'll give you a practical example. So I, at one point, about 5 years ago, got really into dowsing. Dowsing is pouring petrol over things. Dowsing, yeah? Using the pendulum. And it was the most incredible 6 months, because I was using it for everything. I was literally like, what's the time? When's the train coming? Are they telling a lie? If I got lost, which direction? I was just using it so much that I think I hyperpowered my intuition, because what happens in the process of using a pendulum is that you're supposed to adopt a neutral attitude. And in the brain scans of people doing it, they can see the kind of evening out in their brain, like some sort of neutrality shows up. And so with this tool, I learned how to pick up on what energies were going on in people's houses, sort of unseen forces. And I did a whole training. I went and got a mentor and traveled to the north of England in a forest to learn from this wizard-like guy. And by the end of the mentorship, I said to him, I know where you and this whole subject fits in. Another dot on my world perception map. I ended up, after 6 months, doing a series of lectures and a festival on the topic. And I think that's very typical of NE, that will sort of grasp the basic essence of something and be very good at explaining it to others. And then they'll move on to another topic, but it will fit into their worldview in some way. But they don't necessarily have the interest or the patience to always be an expert in something. So often they'll explore with their curiosity and then kind of add it to what they're doing. Okay, so yeah, brainstorming. That's a very key word, or dot connecting. So an NE function really does look like a mind map. It's going off in all directions and connecting dots and making sense of things. And I think that's what makes them usually very talkative or very articulate or very quick, because their brain is literally running around. It's cataloging information in a mind map form, so it's very easy for them to retrieve and link ideas, because that is their way their brain works, and it's their dominant function. Another key word is possibilities. They see not dead people, they see possibilities everywhere. Dream big, and that's why they often are considered advocates or motivational, because they get so enthusiastic about the possibilities in everyone and every situation. And they can, I because that's my dominant function, I know how it works. And this NE brain will literally, whatever environment it's in, it will be tick-tocking away with what this building could be used for, how this room could be arranged, how you could turn this into some sort of business. So I think that for that reason they often make quite good mentors, but often better at giving other people ideas rather than actually following necessarily through on their own ideas. So another keyword is novelty. So 100-thing challenge. They love kind of the weird and wacky and new. Slow travel, new places, meeting new people, trying out new things like a new podcast, a new topic, or maybe they'll try one, and if it doesn't work, they'll try something else. So they're known to often have many hobbies and try out many things. And this is actually really good when they're younger. And this, whatever you're experiencing in the physical world in terms of like new hobbies and new places, it's all adding data points for that introverted sensing that they then use as fuel for their creativity. So if any of you have read that book, The Artist's Way, and she talks about how you should take yourself on an artist date once a week to kind of restock your creative fuel for coming up with ideas. Well, I think for the NE type, their whole life is a creative date. They're literally scanning the environment for new and interesting things that they can accumulate in their world view. Zigzag, so often their career paths would be described as being the zigzag path to success. So they might go and volunteer in Africa and then work on a podcast, and then they might join a corporate for a while and learn. So they're constantly learning and adding that to their their skills, their outlook, their connections. So they often have quite unconventional career paths. So this 100-thing challenge, so I think they like the idea of this sort of thing. But someone once said, and I think this is really true, that for the NE type, minimalism is the way to go, which kind of makes sense. Apart from having all the tools you need for your creativity, SI, which is maintenance, is hard work for the NE function. Yeah, it prefers to focus on newness and creativity. It doesn't like maintaining the physical order and details around. And so I think this is a really good thing for NE dominance, is to really streamline and simplify their physical life so that they can focus on their creativity without that pulling them back. Novelty could also include being early adopters of new technology. So they're likely to have the latest phone or iPad, or be into like exploring what tools are available, and not resisting change, but embracing and looking for it and creating it. Enthusiasm. So definitely, this is one of the ways that I can definitely recognize the ENFP. I think the ENTP try to play it a bit cooler, they've got that T function, so they're not like, but NEFP, when they talk, when they're into something, they will be so enthusiastic about it, and selling it to you and encouraging you. Non-traditional, that's another kind of stereotype of the ENFP, that they will have unusual appearance. They might dye their hair an unusual color, or have dreadlocks or tats, or just something unconventional is very common amongst NE users. And yeah, working from a van, or living on the road, or digital nomad, that kind of fulfills the NE desire for freedom. But they're the type very commonly to have a non-traditional career, and kind of challenged with the SI routine types jobs, which brings me to the next word, which is prison. So again, that was Jung's word, and that's how the NE function feels when it doesn't have freedom to explore, and it feels that it's limited or stuck in a situation which is not ideal. Okay, another key word for the NE is tireless. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to work non-stop, but their energy is quite hyper. And when they are focused on something that they're really interested in, they can be, and this surprises people because often they have this idea of the NE function being a bit distracted, but when it hones in on something that it's exploring, it can be hyper focused to the ignoring everyone and everything else. And so you can see the energy of the SE and the NE types. Too much energy, a little bit like highly caffeinated compared with the other types, which are no energy or calm energy. Definitely you can spot the NE function by this sort of not just enthusiasm, but a little bit frenetic energy sometimes. So another key word is evasion. Again, this is related a little bit to the prison idea that when they're not in the happy place, when things are not working for them, they can be prone to escapism into their imagination of another perfect scenario. What the NE does, when it's unhappy with its current situation, it fantasizes an ideal alternative greener grasses scenario. Now, this picture is actually from Dreams Around the World. So this is another channel. This is actually a channel dedicated to the ENFP and maybe INFP types. Okay, so another similar word to kind of boredom and prison and evasion is abandon. And this is what Carl Jung even mentioned, that you can sort of drop things. So a bit of a dark meme here, but when your extroverted intuition is strong, so this is me holding a baby, oh, it's so cute, oh my God, and then also me, throw it. So this is referencing the NE's ability to be 1 minute super excited about something and next minute onto something else. So whatever that is, they can walk away from it onto the next shiny new thing. So we have have to put my glasses on for this one. So this is a extroverted intuition bingo, which has been created by MBTI concepts. So let's just go through these words. Entrepreneurial spirit, and you can see if you relate to them, if you have this function. Described as weird and quirky. Creative, can always entertain themselves, friends with many different kinds of people. Yeah, it's part of the way they collect data and they love a wide world view, which includes lots of really different kinds of people. Hyper-focused when they are inspired, readily accepts change, great at brainstorming in a group, naturally curious, always working on a side project, open-minded, many casual hobbies which they drop and pick up at will. That reminds me of something random. That is probably one of the biggest ways you can recognize any user. Oh, that reminds me of this story, that thing. Yeah, it's their brainstorming function going on. Difficulty with commitment. There's just too many options in the world. How can I choose one? Went through a random XD phase. Not sure what that's supposed to mean, but yes, definitely go through different phases. Not adverse to risk-taking. Unconventional problem solver, quick-witted, childlike excitement, spontaneous bursts of energy. Ooh, so this is, again, the NE function. It works, it gets enthusiastic and inspired and can be laser focused when it's interested, but maintaining it is a big challenge. A good BSer, yeah, they often have the gift of the gab, has more ideas than they know what to do with, big picture people, and the abstract is definitely more interesting than the concrete. So, which leads us to the weaknesses of the NE function, which I think are pretty obvious so far. They can be very scattered. They can get overwhelmed by taking on way too many things. They also have a tendency to say yes, especially if they're FI users. It could be just too many interesting things or not wanting to disappoint people. So they can have a lot of anxious energy because they've just got way too many pots on the stove, and often they can't manage it, and they're dropping the balls. Surface level thinking. So this is classic NE, jack of all trades, master of none. So that makes them a very eclectic Renaissance type character. And that's why also they can talk with anyone about any topic, because they're so curious and so interested in everything and everyone that they can enter your world and talk about the most random topics. But of course that means they're not so good at being really in depth with a few topics. That restless, bored energy, overly optimistic, and so that's their blind spot, is they think they've got the energy and they can make anything happen, and they always think the best of people, and then they can be unrealistic for sure. And yeah, the grass is always greener. So it's like as soon as they've got something going, what's next? That sort of constant movement. So let's have a look at a few memes and what they can show us about this type. So you can see the ENTP and the ENFP. So these images, which you'll see all over the place if you're familiar with MBTI, they're from the 16personalities.com website, which is where you can take a test if you want to do a free one. But they have these little cartoon characters that we're all sort of familiar with. So yes, we can see attention deficiency, hyperactivity disorder. Yeah, what's the opposite of an OCD? It's the ENFP. So that's the classic scattered, a little bit chaotic stereotype that they have. So another stereotype of the ENFP female is the manic pixie dream girl, which appears in lots of Hollywood movies. So if you're aware of Western culture, you may have seen this sort of quirky, funny, optimistic, bubbly type character who often meets up with the nerdy guy and kind of takes them out of their comfort zone and introduces them to a world of possibilities. So yeah, often people call often the ENFP character is a protagonist in lots of shows because they're going to get into funny mischief, they're going to be quirky, they're going to be kind of interesting, they're a little bit fun character. I think Bridget Jones might be an ENFP, not sure, but the kind of trouble and clumsiness and awkwardness. And okay, so let's have a look at some ENTP. It's not as easy to find ENTP. Most of the ENTP memes are about how they argue and they win, but they lose friends. And I've definitely seen that side of the ENTP is that they, when they think they're right, they will just go for it. So you can see here the stereotype is, arguments. They're known as the debater, so they're also very creative and brainstorming and meme lord. So wonderful with concepts, and then they use that TI, which is the truth seeker. And so when an ENTP roasts you, you'll be roasted to high heaven, we could say. Okay, so I'm leaving you. Is it because I act like I know everything? Yes, I knew it. Yeah, so that's the typical ENTP, because they are so creative with that NE. They're seeing out of the box. They're seeing things that other people cannot see. And then the TI function, which is highly critical thinking. It doesn't accept anybody else's authority except for its own. Of course, the danger is hubris, because they're so often right that when they're not right, they just can't see it or accept it, because they basically, ENTP, really do think that most other people are pretty stupid. I think most ENTPs, if they're honest, would agree with that. This is an interesting bit of information. ENT perception is that they're hyperactive, inattentive, wild and crazy, manipulative, and lacking follow-through. Now, there's definitely some truth in that. That's the ENTP's sort of negative side. But this is the reality which I've seen in this type, where they're tunnel vision with new projects. They're very mindful and philosophical, and that's that TI function, you know, so they're like really into ideas and truth. Natural community organizers and ambitious to a fault. I would say honest to a fault. One thing that I can't remember who said it, but I thought it was very wise advice. They said, with anybody with the TI function, do not, or I could say for the ENTP, don't take them personally, but take them seriously. They're often some of the most wisest, interesting people that you'll meet, but they will bust your ego. You know, they will find your faults and they'll tell you to your face, and they won't be patient with small talk and superficialities. So you have to be, I think, brave to be close to the ENTP from my experience. Okay, back to ENFP. Me, when I think about how much I've overshared in a conversation. So, yeah, that any function that is overthinking, fast thinking, and then because of their need to connect with people, they can be guilty of oversharing. And then let's take this garbage out for them being realistic. Hard to swallow pills for the ENFP, that you have to be disciplined to succeed and not rely on bursts of motivation. And also nobody, ENFPs, reality can be whatever I want. So I think it's very possible, unfortunately, that the NE function is the type that in a young person might come out as, oh, I think I'm a cat. I'm going to identify as a cat, you know, trying on all different identities and then probably fighting for the marginalized because the NE function is so open and curious and able to absorb any perspective and anyone's weirdness kind of into their heart, that they would definitely be sticking up for marginalized groups or different points of views. So I think there's a lot of NE activists, possibly. Okay, so I hope that's given you a good insight overview into the enthusiastic world of the NE energy. Of course, it's my function, so it's easy to talk about, but I will have the pleasure of exploring all the other functions and finding out what's in their unique world with the upcoming videos about all the functions. So do stay tuned, and please do like and subscribe and comment. You can see that I'm a very new channel, not that new, but I haven't put any energy into the channel now. I really want to focus. So any sort of interaction would be much appreciated. Thanks for being here. See you in the next video.